Hello, leggies and janglefins, and a quick virtual high five to anyone who figures out where that's from. Welcome to another episode of Currently Inked. This is episode number 34. Glad to have you here, as I always am. And as is sometimes the case, I recorded this a while ago, about 30 seconds after the last episode of Currently Inked. So not a lot has changed since then. I'm just gonna dive back into the questions and into the pens, try to get caught up on this backlog, because y'all been asking a lot of questions, which I love. So this first question comes from Jonathan in Virginia. I like this question. Who says, I have some ink trapped behind the seal of my Pilot Con 70 converter. Do you have any tips or tricks on how to clean it out? Every time I press down on the button in the back, some of the trapped ink sticks to the inside of the barrel of the converter. I don't want to accidentally mix inks because of this, and was wondering if you knew a way to clean the converter completely. Thank you. Well, let me begin by saying, I freaking hate all the Pilot converters. I hate them, I hate them, I hate them. Much like last episode when I bitched and moaned about the Sailor converters, I hate the Pilot converters as well. Hate. If I may quote one of my favorite movies, I hated them so much. There were flames on the side of my face. I hate the Pilot converters. I hate the Sailor converters. I don't mind the Platinum converters, but they're ridiculously overpriced. So Pilot's got 3 converters out right now. They've got the Con 20, which is that squeezy one. I thought I heard somewhere that that's been discontinued. I don't know if that's true or not. The Con 40, which replaced the Con 50, which is a twist converter with a minuscule ink capacity, and then the Con 70, which has a really nice sized ink capacity, but the most miserable push button filling system, and it is impossible to clean well. So I have run into this problem several times, and on the most recent on the Pen Addict Slack, so if you're not familiar with the Pen Addict podcast, there's a Slack room that they have. And someone said, do this. So fill the converter with water with a syringe and put it so the opening is down on the bottom of the glass, and then push the button a couple of times. That will actually force water up behind the seal where it's stuck in your converter, and that should help clear out the water. Then you can flick the water out and flush it out with a syringe, and you should be good to go. I've not tried that yet, but that's what they recommend. What I normally try to do is I fill it with a syringe with one hand and press the button with the other hand, just trying to get the ink out from behind them. I hate those things, hate them. Pilot, I'm gonna say to you what I said to Sailor. You make glorious pens. Your pens are wonderful. The nibs are fantastic. The materials are sometimes a little on the boring side, but they all write really well. For the love of all that is good and holy in this world, please put your amazing, brilliant designers to work and come up with a converter that doesn't suck. Please, I am begging, begging. I want to be able to love your converters as much as I love your pens. And scene. All right. On the side of my face, heaving, breathing flames. Yeah, no. I got in trouble for this. I went off on a rant about the converters back in my review of the Pilot Metropolitan from forever ago. A pen that I have since learned to my detriment. It's dangerous to not love in this community, because if you say you don't love the Pilot Metropolitan, apparently you also say that you rape babies and murder puppies. Because, oh my gosh, people freak out that I didn't love the Pilot Metropolitan. A big part of the reason I didn't love the Pilot Metropolitan is the stinking converter it came with. Anywho. Oh, I'm going to get the comments for that. I just know I am. Bring it on. All right. This is from Dominique in New Orleans, who says, I'm in grad school, so during little breaks, I find your videos relaxing. Well, thank you, Dominique. Anyway, I'm relatively new to the pen world, but I have smooth paper, Kokuyo, in my campus notebook, and know that the olive on my skin has been making my writing bleed and feather the farther down the page I go. I've switched to making sure I have a piece of scrap paper under my arm, but is there a way I can avoid this? It's a small hassle, but I'm not going to forgo it unless there's some trick I don't know of. Well, Dominique, you could try washing your hands. Maybe that would help. Kidding. Yeah, this is a pretty common problem, especially if you're the kind of person who uses lotions or anything like that. I have actually really dry hands. It comes from digging in the garden. So I don't run into this problem very often. But if you get sweaty hands or you use lotions or that's moisturizers, that sort of thing on your hands, this can become a real problem. So as far as I know, there's really only two ways to do this. One is to learn how to write without resting your hand on the page. Now, this is technically the proper way to write. You shouldn't be resting your hand on the page. It should float above the page, and you should be able to write without, write with the whole arm as opposed to with just the fingers. I've never been able to figure out how to do that. So some people keep, like Stephen Brown has an SBRE Brown sheet protector. It's just a little piece of plastic that you can keep in your notebook, and he just turns it to the side and rests his hand on that, and it slides down the paper and takes care of that problem. I have learned to, for me, the big problem is if I hold, so if I've got where's my notebook here? If I hold my notebook open like this, a lot of times I will use this hand down on the page. And so I've learned to kind of hold the page like this, just using kind of barely the edge. It's not an ideal solution, but yeah, if anyone else has any suggestions, that might help. And, maybe get some of those alcohol wipes and just kind of callus up the side of your hand there with a little bit of dry out the side there. If you're going to do lotion, don't rub it on everywhere. Just rub it on the palm of your hand. I don't know. It's an interesting question. I just don't know how to answer it, which, has never stopped me before, but it's kind of fun anyway. Another question from our good friend Ritzert in the Netherlands. Could you please fantasize on your favorite wanna-have custom-made pen? Well, it would be made out of either Tebaldi celluloid or Omas brown Arco celluloid. It would be, honestly, it would basically be the Classic Pens LB5 made out of one of those two celluloids. I would love to see some celluloid LB5s in some different materials as well, because I love that pen so much. And the material of the LB5 is really, really a great material. But I would love to see something with something that's maybe besides just that striated, that King of Pen, like the King of Pen mosaics are very similar to that. So yeah, probably something along those lines. I find the more I use pens, the more I realize I really do like kind of standard cigar-shaped pens. And you know me, I love my colorful materials. So I would love to have bigger nibs. I'm kind of tired of just the standard number 6 size nibs in general, or maybe Pelican nibs or something like that. I wish Sailor would sell their nibs separately from the pens, because I would love to get a couple of Sailor nibs to put in custom pens. And this might be fun, vintage flex nib. That might be fun to have that put into a custom pen as well, because I really do like writing with vintage flex nibs, even just daily writing, not flex writing. So yeah, there you go. Ron in Houston. I would like to buy a pen with a fine nib that doesn't skip. I would like to keep the price under $20. Any suggestions? Under $20, you're real limited on your suggestions. Probably the only pen in the major production line fountain pen is going to be the Pilot Metropolitan. Find one with a fine nib, and that's probably as far as you're going to be able to go under 20. If you can go up to 30, that opens up the possibilities a lot. So you're looking at a TWSBI Eco, at a Pilot, or at a Lamy Safari or a Lamy Vista. You're looking at a Nemesine Singularity or a Nemesine Neutrino or a Nemesine Fission. Yeah, so those are the ones that I can recommend as having good enough quality control that you're pretty much guaranteed to get a good pen. You go much cheaper than that, and then you start getting into the Chinese pens and the Indian pens that you can buy on eBay, and that is generally something of a crapshoot. You just don't know what you're going to get and how well it's going to work. So yeah, I think probably under $20, your only option is going to be the Pilot Metropolitan. But if folks have other suggestions, I'd love to hear them down below. All right, let's do a currently inked. I haven't done one of these for a little while. So this is a Eversharp Skyline. This is a vintage store find I found at St. Charles Place Antiques here in Renton, Washington, which is the city I live in. And it is the burgundy, or the cap is burgundy. I can't tell if the bottom is burgundy or if it's brown, but it's in really quite good shape. But the thing that makes this pen special, let's get a clean page here so you can have a white background, is this nib. I don't know how well you can see it, but this nib is just gorgeous. It's one of those teardrop nibs is what they call it, and it's super flexible. I repaired the pen and put a sack in it. Sorry, just getting the ink flowing again. It has sat unused for several days, nib up, and it's just a little slow, or either that or I'm out of ink. Oh, there we go. And it just has the most glorious, I'm not sure, it's almost a wet noodle, but I mean, look at the line variation on that. It is just spectacular. I got it for 70, 80 bucks, which is a little much, but it's in really good shape. I do need to polish it up a bit, and I don't know if it's worth getting the gold plating repaired, but man, oh man, is the nib on this thing just glorious. And I have that inked with, I want to say it's Monteverde Capri Blue, which I like a bunch. I tell you what, I think Monteverde has just really hit this new ink line out of the park. I've just been super impressed with every single one of the inks that I put in my pens. They flow well, they dry quickly. The Yosemite green has one of the most gorgeous sheens on a green ink I have ever seen. I posted a picture of it on Instagram a while back. So if you're not on Instagram, head over to instagram.com/penhabit. You can see it a few photos back. Just a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous green color. So yeah, they've been killing it. Sam asks, in the last currently inked, you mentioned one of my all-time favorite inks. Unfortunately, it is no longer available, or at least hard to get. So, do you know of a more than good replacement inks for Sheaffer Script Peacock? So let me pull it up here because I have a sample of it. Let's see what I can find in my. So here is Sheaffer Script Peacock. There are a lot of colors in this general color range. Couple that stick out to me. Let me just, I'm gonna put you all on pause here for a second, come back with a couple of comparisons. Okay, so here is your Sheaffer Script Peacock. Here is Sailor Kobe number 26 Watamasaki Blue. So I think that is quite similar. And another one you might want to take a look at is this one. This is Caran d'Ache Chromatics Hypnotic Turquoise. So I mean, there are a lot of turquoises in this family, but these are the ones that kind of came up as a close match. So I would give those a chance and see if either of those would work out well for you. And being that you're in Japan, you might actually be able to get access to the Kobe inks quite easily and much less expensively than we can here in the US. So I would be kind of jealous of you. This next question is a really interesting one from Mirto in Greece, who says, after buying more than 90 bottles of ink, half of which I don't particularly like, tell me about it, and realizing that I have already accumulated more ink than I could ever use, preach, I am considering going for samples instead. How much ink do you find enough to sample a color, comparing it to your other favorites in the same color family, and decide if you are going to buy a bottle? Do you pick a random pen to ink up, or do you have a specific test pen, like one of your favorite LB5s, for example, as a standard to objectively rate them? So, in my mind, when I'm using inks for anything other than the ink reviews I review for this channel, objectivity is of absolutely zero concern to me. I just don't care that much. So no, I don't use a specific pen to ink them up. I want to know how it works in my pens. I usually, before I make a decision, well, first of all, clearly from the morass of ink on the shelves behind me, I don't often make my decisions about based on samples. I just buy the bottle. I'm not that patient. So for me, really, I need 2 to 3 milliliters because I want to fill at least one pen, and I need enough left over in the vial to swab my cards and write the name of the ink down at the bottom. So that's really all I need. And I really only need one pen to ink it up with because I can get a sense of whether or not I'm going to like the color with one pen. So that's my process. Now, when I sit down to do a full-blown ink review, I need about 10 milliliters of ink. I can't use a sample vial for my reviews. I actually need to buy a bottle of ink for my ink reviews because I fill 7 pens and they're always the same pen, and I do a chromatography and I do, all these different tests. So yeah, if you're one of those people who wants to approach your inks objectively instead of subjectively and just kind of let instinct lead you, first of all, I think that's awesome. I'm not that kind of a person, so it doesn't make sense for me, but if you are, go for it. I would say somewhere between 5 and 10 milliliters is what you would really need to get a solid sense in a few pens, maybe a swab or two if you wanted to do a chromatography. So that's kind of how I think I would approach it. Yeah, but aside from that, I don't objectively rate my inks at all until I have to do a review for the channel, and then I will do it, but grudgingly. All right. Let's see. What do we have? What else do we have inked this week? What haven't I talked about for a while? I haven't talked about this one for a little while. So this is a Sheaffer Legacy. This is one of their beautiful inlaid nibs. You can see it here, that kind of diamond-shaped inlaid nib. This is a factory oblique stub, and this is one of their color prototypes. So this is not the Sheaffer Fantasies made by someone else. This is actually Sheaffer's acrylic, and they made it in the factory to see if they liked it or not. At least that's according to what I was told when I bought the pen. I don't know if that's how true that is, but that's what I was told. I inked this up with De Atramentis Document Blue, and it's not an ink I like very much. I actually don't really like it at all. Wait, is that the right one? Yeah, that's the right one. It's fine for a blue. It's kind of flat and bland colored, but it is really supposed to be really waterproof. And I generally address envelopes when I'm sending mail with my abortive attempts at an italics hand. So because it has an oblique italic nib on it that writes beautifully, this is often the pen I will ink up with a waterproof ink to send out letters. And I've been trying and largely failing to get caught up on my backlog of mail. I'm now getting caught up to August of 2017. So there's going to come a point in the not too distant future where I'm just going to have to say, I'm sorry, I cannot reply to every letter that gets sent to me. And hopefully people will understand. I love to write people. I just don't have very much time to do it. And I don't like going to the effort of writing a letter for half a page of text. If you can't write 3 or 4 pages, don't bother writing. Send an email. That's kind of my personal take. So, but anyway, yeah, that's kind of how I handle my inks. And in all honesty, a lot of the inks on my shelves, I've never even opened the bottle. I liked the color. I thought about getting it, and then I never open the bottle, never go back to it. Or I write with it once. It's okay, but I've been pretty seriously considering just clearing out my ink collection, reducing it to maybe 30 bottles of ink that I really like. I don't know that I'm going to be capable of doing that just from an emotional standpoint. I feel like I need to be on a show called Ink Hoarders, but I've been thinking about it a little bit. I'm sure there are people who'd be lining up to get to get some of my ink collections. No, you cannot have a bottle of Caran d'Ache Grand Canyon. Okay, this next question comes from Stanley in Santa Clara, who says, My question for you is about handmade pens. I've often heard that handmade pens have better quality than mass-produced pens, but I'm not sure I completely buy that. I understand that handmade pens, like a Newton, like a Sean Newton pen, or a Nakaya, are unique, but I don't think uniqueness always equals good quality. I think that some of those tooling machines may have a very high precision in manufacturing that is hard for human artisans to achieve, though not impossible. What are your thoughts on handmade versus factory-produced pens? So I think, first of all, I've not heard the assertion that handmade pens are of higher quality, better quality, this phrase you used, than mass-produced pens. Um, where I think and it depends on what you think of when you think of quality, but in my mind, quality is more about just the precision of how the parts fit together. It's about the aesthetic and the whole and the feel of it in the hand. And while you can get very well-made mass-produced pens, I'm thinking of pens like the Pilot Custom 823, which is a beautiful pen, really nice in the hand, mass-produced. They crank out a bunch of them. They're all really, really nice. Their machine, Pilot has great machines and great engineers and great designers, and they know how to build, fiddly, really intricate stuff like this and do it really well. But they're also kind of soulless. The pens don't have a lot of soul. And even a lot of the mass-produced pens still go through a lot of handwork to get them ready to go. So if you're talking about something like, this Omas, this is, it's a factory-made pen. It's an Omaso Jiva Brown Arco. Yes, there was probably a CNC computerized lathe that cut the thing, but it was probably polished by hand. I suspect that even a lot of the Pilot pens are polished by hand. So I don't know that the distinction between mass-produced and custom-made pens is quite as definite as it might appear. Now, can you get handmade pens that rival the quality of a factory-made pen? Yeah. Are you often going to? From a strictly construction standpoint, no, I don't think so. I don't know that most custom pen makers are ever going to be able to make pens with the same level of precision that you're going to get from a huge factory that's cranking out, thousands of pens a day. Some of the custom pen makers, and I'm thinking in this particular case of, the Edison Pen Company, they are technically custom pens, but they are models that are turned on a CNC lathe and then finished by the staff at Edison. So, yeah, I love custom pens. I've got one that is probably going to go into production in the next couple of weeks. I'm hoping, and it's going to be gorgeous. I cannot wait to show you guys this pen. It is going to be so cool. It's coming from Renee at Scriptorium Pens, and I'm putting together an idea. I've never had my own pen made by Jonathan Brooks of the Carolina Pen Company. I bought one of his ready-made pens, and I bought at the DC show in 2016, and I've used pens that other people have bought and have had sent to me for review purposes, but I've never ordered one of my own. And with some of the really fascinating work he is doing in urushi lacquer these days, I gotta get on his list. I don't even know what I want yet, but I gotta get on his list here pretty soon. So, yeah, I like both. I like both, and I think both have their place. I feel a lot more comfortable carrying around something like a Pilot 823 because I feel like I have to be less delicate with it. And that's, I think, maybe where I feel like the difference lies. It's not in the quality of the production, it's in the robustness. I feel like a company like Pilot can spend a lot of time tweaking the formula of the acrylic that they injection mold and that sort of thing. But whereas a lot of these custom handmade makers are working with materials that are available to them. It's not to say that they're bad quality. I've never had a custom pen break on me, and I've had pens made out of ebonite and acrylic and resin and celluloid and wood, and I've never had any problems with it. But anyway, that's kind of where I land on the question. Nick in Iowa says, if you had to pick one favorite pen manufacturer in Italy, one in Germany, and one in Japan, which three would they be? Also, if price was no obstacle, would you prefer Pelikan or Mont Blanc? Well, let me answer that last question first. Pelikan. I like their pens better. Mont Blanc pens are, their production line pens are boring. Their nibs are great, but they're boring. Pelikan does more interesting stuff. Their nibs can be a little problematic. I don't like the nib on the M1000 very much. I love the nib on the M800, at least the ones that I've tried so far. If I had to pick one favorite manufacturer in Italy, it would probably be Aurora right now. It would have been Omas before they closed, but I say it's Aurora right now. I just really like a lot of the work they're doing, and I can't wait until my purple 88 comes. What is it? Not the Neutrino, the Neptuno or something like that. The purple one. I can't wait till that one comes. And I may be getting my hands on one of the new Flex nibs, the Aurora 88 Flex nibs, so I'm excited about that too. In Germany, it would probably be Pelikan with a close follow-up of Diplomat. I really like a lot of what Diplomat's doing, and their nibs have been really spectacular for me. And in Japan, I think my favorite's going to be, oh, I don't know. For me, it's kind of a tie. I can't pick one. It's a tie between Pilot and Platinum. I really like both of them for different reasons. I think Pilot probably makes better mass-produced pens, but I feel like the nibs on Platinum's pens are a little bit better, but their model offerings are a little bit weaker. They don't seem to have as many good models as Pilot does. So, yeah. If I had to pick one, I'd probably lean a little bit toward Platinum just because they don't have those miserable stinking converters that I hate so much. I cannot wait to read the comments on this episode. I'm going to get so much hate from the Pilot lovers. It's going to be great. All right, this next question comes from Ritzert in the Netherlands, who says, Matt, what is your experience with / opinion on music nibs? I notice you don't own one in your collection. I don't, actually. Well, I do own a music nib. I just don't have it installed in any pens. It's one of the Franklin Christoph 1.9 millimeter music nibs. I know people kind of get excited about music nibs, and I understand it because I was when I first learned about them too. But in all honesty, they're just big stubs. They're stub nibs. And since I really struggle with stub nibs, there's not a lot of reason for me to have one. I don't write music by hand, or if I do, I write it onto my Microsoft Surface and not a piece of paper. So the original intent of the pen, which was meant to be held at kind of 90 degrees to the paper so you could draw that way for a note head and then up for a skinny line and then down to do the little flag, or I guess it's technically like that. But I get it. I just don't think it's really necessary. Now, if you're someone who wants to play around with a really wet stub nib, great, more power to you. And goodness knows, I have watched some of those videos of Aziza from Gourmet Pens playing around with her vintage Waterman Flex nibs, Flex music nibs. Are you kidding me with that stuff? Love Aziza, by the way, but those, I mean, every time I see one of those videos, I'm like, man, I need to get me one of those. And then about 5 minutes later, I think, what in the world would I do with a pen like that? It would sit unused in my case and I'd feel guilty about it. So I'm going to leave the Flexi music nibs to people who are actually going to use them for some sort of calligraphy, and I will stick to my regular Flexi nibs. So yeah, I mean, got nothing against them, but it's just not, it's just not my thing. All right, this next question comes from Lisa in Massachusetts, who says, I like the paper in your Inky Fingers notebooks. I have a request. Could you please make Inky Fingers notebooks with perforatable pages, especially for the passport sized? Midori used to make lined passport notebooks with pages that could be perforated, but discontinued them. This made the Midori passport almost unusable to me. I like to write notes and perforate pages if and when necessary. I recently purchased leftover stock lined perforatable passport Midori notebooks from Japan by choice. It cost a bomb. I don't want to do that again. So putting perforations in your notebooks is actually quite an expensive add-on to the cost of production. And while I know that there are some people who like it, I also know that there are some people who really hate perforated pages, especially in these bifold staple-bound notebooks. So that's something I'd have to look at. I'm not saying no, but it would have to be something I'd have to look at, and the cost would probably be higher than regular notebooks because each page would have to actually be perforated twice and then folded. And that's really, really hard to do without ripping the paper in the process. So, I mean, it's possible to do, but not a lot of printers have the machinery capable of doing that. And without buying the specialty machinery and printing my notebooks myself, that would be really tricky for me to do. The bigger problem, though, and I mentioned it in the previous episode of Currently Inked, is I no longer have access to the paper that I have been using in my Inky Fingers notebooks, and I haven't decided what is next for the line of notebooks. So whether it is a new kind of paper, whether it is discontinuing the line, I think the next big obstacle to mount is figuring out what I'm going to do or where I'm going to get the paper for the next round of notebooks, because honestly, I have no idea what's next. I don't know what's going to be available. A lot of printers won't work with paper unless it's been through all kinds of tests to make sure it won't ruin their machines. And I'm just not super clear on whether or not I want to go to the effort of becoming an importer, bringing in huge amounts of paper at ridiculous costs, where I can even get the wholesale versions of that paper, going through the process of getting that paper certified with various machines, and if I will have printers who will even work with it, because a lot of them won't. So, yeah, the whole Inky Fingers notebook line started as a way for me to generate income from the pen habit without just begging for donations. It was a way to say, hey, please support what I do, and I'm going to give you something in return. I don't like saying, go to Patreon, send me money on PayPal. And I don't really love having a sponsor for everything I do. And so that's what Inky Fingers was. But if Inky Fingers becomes an amount of work that is so much that it's like running an entire business, which I simply don't have the time for, there may come a point where I just have to say, I got to wash my hands of this, hand it off to someone else and say, go do with the brand what you want, because I don't know yet. So I've got ideas for notebooks on the Inky Fingers line, probably another 30 or 40 varieties of notebooks, different sizes, different formats, different layouts. I've thought about doing bullet planners and letter logs and graph and dot grid and A5 size and A4 size and hardbound and letter, correspondence pads and stuff like that. But if it's just going to have the same paper that everybody else has out there, I don't see the point. Honestly, it's so much work to hire a designer and find printers and go through the proofing process, and then all I've got is the same paper that everybody else has that's pretty fountain pen friendly but not great. So that's still kind of up in the air. But perforatable pages, perforated pages where you can tear out the pages, that's something to consider. I'll have to keep an eye on that. I suspect if Midori discontinued doing it, they probably weren't selling enough of them to make it worth their while cost-wise. And if it's not worth their while cost-wise with the volume that they do, I doubt I could make it work financially on my side either. But we'll see. Once I get the larger supply chain problems figured out, we'll deal with that as it comes along. Well, let's see. I'm going to grab one more. And before I do, I only have 4 questions remaining in the queue. So if you have not submitted questions, now would be a real good time. Otherwise, I'm not going to have anything to talk about on the next episode of Currently Inked. I'm finally almost caught up. So this last question comes from Dan in Joliet. I'm going to think that's how you pronounce it there, in Illinois. Dan says, has anyone ventured into the cryogenic treatment of nibs? As a musician, I have had new brass instruments that have gone through this process, which affects the metal molecules, ending with the more focused, warmer sound of a much older instrument, which is a good thing. I'm curious how this application would affect nibs in general, especially flex nibs and their properties. By treating the instrument at sub-zero temperatures, inherent stresses within the structure of the brass called residual stresses are released. This allows the instrument to play and sound the way it was designed to perform. Just wondering. I have never heard of this in the production of nibs. I would be surprised if anyone is doing it. Certainly I don't think anyone's doing it from a commercial production standpoint yet. People might be experimenting with it, particularly as they're working on flex nibs and trying to make flex nibs available to the general public again. Yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested if other people have heard about cryogenic treatment of nibs, or kind of what the hope would be. It's interesting. I'd be interested to know from, if there are any metallurgists out there, what cryogenic treatment might do for gold in a nib versus what it does for brass in, for brass in a trumpet or a French horn or something like that. Because if the residual stresses are released, I wonder if it would soften the nib up so much that it would actually cause it to spring or to bend. I don't know. That's kind of interesting. I'd like to know more about that. So anyway, well, thanks for the question and introducing me to something I wasn't familiar with. All right. Well, I think that is going to do it for this episode of Currently Inked. As kind of I don't want to ask you for money without giving you something in return, I do still have some Currently Inked notebooks left. So if you're still in the market for them, head over to penhabit.com, purchase them. Who knows how long the stock's going to be available? I've got a bunch of factory seconds because ran into some problems. So I'll be putting those up on the website soon, hopefully. So if you want cheaper versions of the notebooks, you can get those as well. And of course, now that I'm running out of notebooks, if you want to donate via Patreon, or the way Patreon works is you say, I want to donate $2 for every episode you do, up to $10 a month. And so for the first 5 episodes I do, you get charged $2 each, and then at the end of that maximum, you won't get charged anymore. And they actually charge your card at the end of the month. That works great. That way you're not paying if I'm not creating anything. But if you also wanted to donate one time or set up a recurring donation via PayPal, you could do that, or via Venmo, you could do that as well. I really do appreciate it. I don't know if you've noticed, but I've had fewer and fewer sponsors and fewer sponsored pens since the beginning of 2017. That's not by accident. I was trying to get away from having quite as many sponsors as I had before for a couple of reasons. The main one being that when you have sponsors, you have to put out the videos. You're kind of required to put out the videos so you can sponsor the videos. And I needed to take a step back because I just didn't have the time to keep up the schedule I had done, before I had gotten my job. So yeah, I've got sponsors on the website, far fewer sponsors on the video, far fewer pens coming in from retailers, and that's fine because I got plenty of pens to last me through the end of the season at the end of May. But if you like what I do and you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you hate this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe and head over to Pen Habit to see the show notes and learn how to support the Pen Habit further. So thank you so much for watching, and we will see you here next time on the next episode of Currently Inked.